Hi there. So, very well. I hope everyone's well. This is Brother Ben, Venerable Rakkhita Samanera. And so I'm going to be giving a talk today, and the subject is going to be all about perception, mindfulness, finding joy in the present, fostering resilience, and seeking a balanced perspective. So these are very important topics for us in all throughout our lives. So I've got a few questions for you before we sort of go too far in, for you to consider. And I'll try to post these as well. So firstly, about perception. Let's just take a look at that one first of all. So can you recall a time when your initial perception of a situation turned out to be completely different from reality? Can you think of a situation like that? And then how did that perception shape your understanding of reality? Or sorry, of perception? How did that experience shape your understanding of perception? And then what are some biases or assumptions that you notice influencing your perception of other people, of others, and other things, and the world around you? So people, things, and the world around you. What are some of the biases or assumptions that you notice influencing that? So fourthly, how can you challenge and broaden these perspectives? So these are the big four just for the first one, which is about perception. So can you recall a time when your initial perception of a situation turned out to be completely different from the reality? I'll give you an example in a minute, a funny one. How did that experience shape your understanding of perception, the way that perception works? And thirdly, what are some biases or assumptions that you notice influencing your perceptions of others or the world around you? And how can you challenge and broaden those perspectives? So that's also the work. The work of mindfulness is to rid ourselves as much as we can of biases that are going to cause suffering, biases that are going to cause unnecessary and avoidable stress, and assumptions, and the kind of thinking mindset where we're going to be limiting our happiness and joy in the present moment and in the future, and ruining what potentially could be good experiences and opportunities. Funny thing happened that I want to share that illustrates this when an initial perception turned out to be different from reality, for example. So I'd like to share that. It was when back in the day, when I was much younger, I visited Sydney, Australia, and I was working very hard at that time. I wasn't a monk at that time. It was prior to my first ordination in Thailand. And I was working very hard. I was working for a newspaper, and I was working as an illustrator for one of the major newspapers and for lots of magazines. And I was up early in the morning, I was up late at night, and all day long I was either going to offices and receptionists, and and sort of trying to find how I could get to be drawing for people. So then a lot of work came in. I was very, very tired. I was very, very hardworking. That would give me just all of the dream that I had, which was having this really lovely life. This wasn't it. So I was getting very stressed and very tired, and I really wanted some time in nature. So I decided, without really looking into it too carefully and planning, and remember in those days, no internet, not as easy as all that. I thought what I'd do is go out to the countryside. This is what I would have done at home in England, and do some camping. And I didn't have a tent, but I had a sleeping bag. So I decided what I would do was to just get my sleeping bag and a bag, not think too hard, throw some food in a bag, and just sort of catch a train. And you can get a train out of Sydney towards the Blue Mountains. So I did that, and I was fairly late setting off, and I think I was setting off about mid-afternoon or late afternoon. And by the time evening was starting to fall, I was still on the train, winding my way up through the sort of small towns outside of the city, out into the countryside. I think somewhere like Toongabbie or somewhere like that, somewhere sort of quite far out. And it was getting dark. So I thought I'd better get off here. Don't know where I am. I like that. I've often liked doing that in my life, is throwing myself into the unexpected and the unknown. So I walked off and I thought I could see some woods, nature. So I sort of headed across a field, and then sure enough, crunched into some woods. It wasn't really a path, but I made my way through. It's darker and darker and darker. So I thought, well, just whatever. I'll just pitch down here. Not pitch. I'm just going to get in my sleeping bag and cover over. So I was exhausted, zonk, straight out. Slept deep in the night. And then very early in the morning, I could see, you know, my head was covered over by the sleeping bag. I could see sort of daylight sort of coming up at dawn, and I could hear the birds chirping. And then I heard a sound. And I was like, what was that? That didn't sound like anything. I peeked out, my head out the sleeping bag, and there were two men walking past in, you know, yellow cardigans and with their golfing trolleys. And they were like, morning, morning. And I was in a little tiny little bit of trees in the middle of a golf course. So this is an example, a funny example. And we all had a laugh. And I was like, morning, sat up like, oh, right, just in a golf course. That's a time when my initial perception, woods, nature, oneness with nature, you know, sort of get back to, you know, refreshing, amazing sights of the outback, turned out to be completely different for reality. It was just a little commercial golf course in a small town. So it wasn't quite what I expected. So perception, the way we see things and the way that we cultivate awareness about the nature of perception and how we can challenge you know, assumptions. There's many ways that we can do it. We can check out. Our confirmation bias can be challenged. So we can actually make sure that we don't just believe what our mind tells us. And we can also expect our perceptions to be distorted. We can not over expect them, but just say, well, yeah, I know, I think that's what's happening, but I could check it out, and then I would really know, rather than, I guess so, yeah, probably. You know, it's better to then get evidence and check and check and check, and then find out what the real truth is through doing this. This is something that the Buddha encouraged, by the way, just to put that in there. When somebody is being blamed, we go, well, the Buddha would never allow that to just go. He would ask, you know, to come forward and sort of, what's your side of the story? For example, mindfulness. So let's look at this. So this is the second one. The first one is perception. The second one is mindfulness, embracing mindfulness. The third one is finding joy in the present, not in the past and not in the future, but here and now. Fourthly, fostering resilience. Resilience is the bounce back. You have a problem, you bounce back. You recover without taking months, without taking years to recover. You bounce straight back. There's ways to do that. So fostering and encouraging those skills and that ability and the views that support it as well. So fifthly, seeking a balanced perspective. Wise attitudes. One, cultivate awareness about the nature of perception. Two, embrace mindfulness. Three, find joy in the present. Fourthly, fostering resilience. And fifthly, a balanced perspective. So in a mature way, do all those. When I say find joy in the present, it's not surrendering to absolute reckless hedonism and sensation seeking. It's healthy joy. Secondly, so the second one, mindfulness. So this is the question for you. How do you find yourself fully present and engaged in the current moment? How often, I missed a word out there, how often do you find yourself fully present and engaged in the current moment? Or are you someone who's overthinking the future? Or is someone who's just caught up in the past and the relationships of the past and the failures of the past and the angsts of the past, or other places? Oh, I'm all over there, I'm all over there, I'm all over there. And you're not really in the present, not really with the people you're with. You're so busy working on your pension plan, that you miss your children. You don't actually notice them growing up. You don't spend time with them. These are the kind of things, or so caught up in a kind of therapy that's all about your childhood that you're not here and now enough. Second part of that question of mindfulness. So how often do you find that? what are some mindfulness practices? Some, not one. So you can have quite a few, or techniques that have helped you cultivate present moment awareness. You can share. C, the third part of this one, can you share an experience where practicing mindfulness has had a positive impact on your well-being or relationships? So a little bit of group support and sharing there. So that would be really helpful. All right. Let's take a little bit of a fun breather. So you're going to have a lightweight and sense of humor. This is part of today's big three things here. One is learn about perception. Second is embracing mindfulness. But there's a big third one there, which is how to have a lightweight and fun. You know, it's very important. Life can be very funny. So I really think that the Buddha had a great sense of humor, just to throw that in there, just to annoy the non-Buddhists. But I'll give you an example. This happens all the time. And particularly, don't take yourself so seriously, right? That's very important, both about resilience and balanced perspective. Joy in the present is not take yourself serious. I'll give you an example off the top of my head. I'll give you a couple. So one, I was in England. This is what I became a Samanera in 2010. And in 2009, I went to Asia. But there was a long time in there where I was in street clothes, 23 years. When I was a layman, I decided to go back and be a regular layperson for quite a while, 23 years, actually. So there was a time when I was just walking down the high street of my town in England, in Hertfordshire, it's a town called Hitchin. And there was a stray dog, but a very, very well looked after, healthy looking stray dog. I don't know if you know the type, Labradors or retrievers, golden retrievers. There's this kind of dog, you know, real family dog. And it was just happily, you know, sort of trotting up the high street. So I was like, that's not good. That's got out. And somebody's going to be missing this dog. This is not any old mongrel stray. So I went up and I called it over and I got it. And I happened to be outside. There's a sort of French cafe, a French coffee shop, bistro, you know, sort of restaurant there, just there. But I was just at the park bench just outside the front of this store. And I also looked at the disc on the collar of the retriever, and I actually knew the person. So I called them up, and I called them up, and I said, "Hi there, Isabel. Is this your dog? I've got to." And they were like, "Oh, you found it? Oh, great, wonderful. Where are you?" So I said, "Well, I'm just outside the French coffee shop in the high street." And she goes, "Oh, okay, I'll jump in the car. I'll come down. You must have just got out." So I was just waiting there for this to happen, and then one of the waitresses from the coffee shop came out to me and said, "Oh," and I said, yes, sorry, it's okay. They said, "Yes, we saw the dog, we saw him running around." And I said, "It's okay now, I've handled it." And she said to me, "Would you like a bowl of water?" And so I said to her, "Oh, no, it's okay. I had a cup of tea before I came out." So this is an example where we can use this twisting the way that things can have a double meaning. A lot of comedy and a lot of humor is based on this. I think it's called malapropism. There was someone in our plays, like in Oscar Wilde's time, called Mrs. Malaprop. But it's like appropriating things wrong. And you can do it on purpose, like I did. I knew what she meant. I knew she meant a bowl of water for the dog. But I was just playing on that. And she was like, "Oh, no, I didn't mean for you. I meant for the dog." And I was like, I'm just mucking around. Which is that I do that all the time. And it gets me in trouble all the time, because it's like low-hanging fruit as far as humor goes. But sometimes it's very genuine. I think this is what it plays off of. Recently, I arrived in Perth to a temple in Caversham. And this temple had been not used for very long, hadn't been used for many years. And I was in for a few days, and I thought after that, I'll go for a little walk around the block and just walk around, have a look. I'd noticed that there was a little park opposite on the other side of the road. And so I decided to have a little stroll. So I walked over the road and I just stood there looking at the park, which had a river going through it. And I thought, yeah, I'll take a long, I'll take a walk up that river, come back the other side, maybe if there's a little bridge, just gonna have a little bit of exercise. And then there was a bungalow just right next to, and I was sort of near the fence and I was just looking at the river. And then this thick Australian accent voice came through the fly screen. And it said, "Oh, look at you. And who do you think you are in your bathrobe?" And I was like, and I thought, well, I'm getting insulted here. I'm getting abused. There's the perception, okay? So I was like, they're talking about me. So I decided to go for a walk and brush it off, stick up my chin, pretend not to be affected, not go up to the window and go, hey. I wasn't going to react. So anyway, I thought, well, I'll go for a walk, and then that will sort of loosen off my hackles, which were raised hearing this. So I walked up the river, found a little bridge, all the time thinking, God, people, typical. I've got a bunch of people are sitting, and they just probably sit all day long in their sitting room. They're cracking open, tinnies of lager and getting drunk and just, seeing this strange alien across, sort of person, and then mocking them loud and having a good laugh at his expense. I thought that was my picture. I could visualize all that happening and all the details and everything about them and what they wear and their beer belly. I could kind of like picture it. All of this was manufactured by my perception. So I went up and then I came back. And then to my amazement and surprise, when I started to realize, oh, wait a minute, I saw coming out from that little bungalow, little house, a whole healthy looking family getting in the car ready for a day trip. And they had a daughter who had clearly just been getting ready to go out. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. It was the mum talking to the daughter as she was just getting ready to go out, probably just had a shower or something and just coming out in her bathrobe. She wasn't talking to me at all. So I completely distorted what was really happening. This kind of stuff, when you can laugh at yourself also, is a big part of it. So I think we've got to do that, and we shouldn't be too super serious as well. It's good to have a bit of fun. So think about like this one, another one for you, moving on. Finding joy in the present. In what ways do you tend to take things too seriously? Mentioning no names like me in that one. Or get caught up in stress and worry. I mean, that would be stressing for me, because I'd be like, even the neighbors are insulting me. Everybody here in Australia is going to, mock me, go, look at him in his bathrobe as they see me. Well, totally wrong, distortion. How can you incorporate more lightheartedness and playfulness into your daily life? So that's a good question for you. Something I really noticed, some elements of my family, I think, were way too self-serious. And I noticed when I went out and I started meeting more people in my social life, like some of these people have got a great sense of humor, or even people that I met, like Clive James, or, those sort of cartoonists in the newspapers. Some people have got really good senses of humor. And some people in my school had really good senses of humor as well. There was a time when we had a geography lesson, and in the geography lesson, it was all about slides about Italian economy, the Italian economy, and it was all about its industry and its agriculture and its economy and how it all works. It was a geography lesson, and as part of it, the teacher, who had a really boring voice, said, and this part is Milan. Next slide. And this is the fields around the Milan area. And most of the work in Italy is done by manual labor. And he was about to go on to the next slide. And my friend said, sir, who's manual labor? Everybody cracked up, because manual, as you know, is an Italian name. And manual labor just sounds like it. So this people like that, the wits and the people who have got very sharp on the moment things, they're not just ticking over on autopilot. They're very alert to the uniqueness of the moment, and therefore they can capture it and to their great benefit. You know, he was really a popular guy, and I thought that was a sort of brilliant. So can you share a moment when you found unexpected joy in a seemingly ordinary or even a challenging situation? And how did that shift in perspective affect your experience? So I always love hearing those. It's something that happens in Buddhism and Dharma and the Sangha, particularly, is self-seriousness. That happens a lot. So we got to really watch that. I really like it how some people are able to be flexible and everything with it. So I thought I would have a go at revamping the 5 precepts at one point. And I thought what a really good one to start off with would be, I undertake the first precept to refrain from killing conversations. So, you know, starting conversations like, are you vegetarian? You know, like things like that, that there's only a sort of bound to lead to a bit of a boring conversation, sort of, yeah, you know, like it's sort of heavy already. So you've got to undertake the, from killing conversations, you've got to refrain from killing conversations. That's a no-no. Otherwise you can have no social life at all. Secondly, you've got to undertake the precept to not steal other people's breath away or take that which isn't given, such as butting in with unwelcome comments and ruining the flow of the conversation. You've also got to be aware of not stealing the limelight, as that's a semi-serious offense. So that's the second precept. Firstly, refrain from killing conversations, and secondly, you are not to steal people's breath away by snatching in there. Thirdly, you've got to undertake the precept to not abuse sensual pleasures, such as repeatedly offering Turkish delight, those pink jellies in talcum powder after 9 p.m., unless it's accompanied by very, very strong coffee in tiny cups. And the jellies are in talcum powder, not the offerer. And if that happens, run. There's an additional item on this precept in the Chinese Nikaya involving refraining from wearing black socks on sunny days, while wearing shorts, which are above the knee line, whilst wearing sandals. But that's a very grave offense. So in the fourth one, I got to undertake the precept to not use speech in an ancient language that no one understands, unless they have given you a free lunch, in which case there's a proviso. Secondly, slander, unless it involves very witty insults, in which case we will all look the other way. Thirdly, part of the speech one package here, harsh speech. Undertake the precept to not use harsh speech, unless it's aimed at very small, ferocious, yapping dogs going for your ankles, and of course, younger siblings, in which case everyone's going to be understanding. And fourthly, nonsense talk and gossip, unless it's about politicians, kings, princes, and TV celebrities, and that other person running the temple, in which case, good with me. Fifthly, you've got to undertake the precept to refrain from intoxicating self-righteousness and smugness, and being drunk on self-congratulation and headily resting on your laurels requires confession. Laughing at your own jokes, that involves excommunication. Period. Let's move on. Resilience. Now, think of a recent setback or difficulty that you faced. A recent setback, difficulty. How did you navigate through it? What strategies or mindset helped you bounce back? How can embracing a sense of humor and not taking things too seriously contribute to your resilience in challenging times? Any ideas for that one? So I'll give you, again, me. I'll give you an example of that. Recently, I heard that I was going to, due to visa requirements, I was going to have to go from Australia back to Singapore and probably on to Malaysia. And the temple that I was going to be staying at had simply said, well, call us 1 week before you arrive, and we'll let you know if there's any space. There might be some monks here, meaning they might say, no, It's full. And so I asked my friends to create a backup, and they created backup. They said, oh yeah, this place, big Zen center, you'll be okay. That'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's going to be a yes. Fine. We know them very well. The Zen center came back with a no. And so I was left with this, spooky idea. So that was creating me a big amount of anxiety, as you probably expect. Many people, even though through my life I've thrown myself in many unknown situations, such as hitchhiking across foreign countries and things, where you deliberately do that, like a Dhutanga, like a wandering monk. So I thought about this. I thought, oh, what am I going to do, and I came up with this solution. A creative, sort of solution to deal with this, using this resilience. So everybody's into artificial intelligence. I think there's a quote from Oscar Wilde about artificial intelligence. He said that artificial intelligence will be the end of me. One of us has to go. I think this one actually came from ChatGPT, so I'm not sure it's actually contemporaneous with Oscar Wilde. So I decided to use ChatGPT, and I said, look, ChatGPT, hello, good morning, how can I help you? Can I be of any assistance? I said, I've got anxiety. And they, oh. And so they came back, and then I spent about 2 hours chatting with ChatGPT about my anxiety. And I said, it's about this. I've got, they've got temper, and I don't know, and I'm really feeling anxious, and it's giving me a headache, and I can't sleep. So I just chatted with ChatGPT, like as a therapist. So that was all very interesting. And I was actually very pleased with the, because I couldn't think at that point. My brain had frozen up, and I was just like in lockdown, internal lockdown. So I then afterwards copy pasted it all onto a document and highlighted it all and went text to speech. And I just lay there like listening to the whole therapy session back. Again, which was very nice for me, but very boring. After that, you're never going to listen to it twice. So I was thinking, well, what else can I do with this? Because I can't listen to it all over again, not even a bit of it. Isn't there a way I can make it more interesting to listen back to? And I already knew that with ChatGPT, you can get it, you can highlight anything of text, anything, a washing machine repair manual. And you can say to it, make me that again in the style of Oscar Wilde play, or a William Blake poem, or a Seinfeld 12-part episode, whatever the topic goes on. And then maybe you have to sort of mention some character names. So that's what I did, and I thought this was an example of resilience, because it was suddenly like interesting. Suddenly my anxiety problem, traveling from Perth to Singapore, and arriving at a temple that was locked up in the middle of the night, sort of thing, was being turned into an Oscar Wilde melodrama, where two people turn up in a tea shop and are daintily drinking tea, discussing this issue. And it describes the environment, it describes the coffee shop, it gives them names and their different types of characters, and it plays out. And it also included its solutions. So, it started off with this challenge, and then it turned into, that's a really good idea. I like the way you've described that, sort of Sir Fauntleroy, whatever it was. So, this was one example. And then even you can turn it into sort of song styles by Jack Johnson or Elvis Presley or whatever it is that you're into. And this was a way of taking emotions, using artificial intelligence to turn it back into something creative, and then also sort of use it. And then also reflect about this process, because it's proliferating, it's kind of endless. So it's not, mindfulness just gets you right back to the emotion. But this was a way of shaking up the situation a bit and then coming back to mindfulness. I don't say that the solution is also to, go off into creative, only because, like I say, creativity is proliferating, whereas mindfulness tends to simplify onto the moment and just be with what is, which is actually, I think if you combine the two things, I found if you combine the two things, that can work well. That's a strategy. That's a mindset. It worked for me as a kind of creative, Buddhist. Next, the sixth one here. So we've had resilience, and before that we had finding joy in the present moment, and before that we had mindfulness, and before that we had perception. Those were the sort of big ones. And then The last one of that block of 6 main things: perception, mindfulness, finding joy in the present, resilience, and seeking a balanced perspective. 5, 6. Hold on, how did that work out? 1, perception. 2, mindfulness. 3, joy in the present. 4, resilience. Oh, it should be just 5. It's just the thing, a glitch. Tell me it's not under control. So seeking a balanced perspective. So 3 parts. Are there any topics or issues where you find it challenging to consider alternative viewpoints? I remember struggling with feminism quite a bit in England. It's a very hot topic. Very, 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 very hot topic. It's not a hot topic. It was volcanic. And I remember on a friend's Facebook chat threads, and this is a friend who went, we used to know. This was the manual labor guy. That we stayed friends all our life, but he went off to Cambridge and teaching movie studies. And I noticed that he was having a kind of feminist sort of tone conversation on one of his threads with a lady, an old friend of his from America. And I remember sort of joining in on the conversation in a number of inputs, in the comments, a number of comments, one by one, not all as one. So I put woman. Oh, I put the woman, WOMAN, the woman empire. This was really inflammatory. So then it exploded, the lady particularly exploded all about this. And then I put the wise, and she sort of went quiet, because she was clearly sort of someone who really wanted to advocate for this thing that females are the dominant species and Amazonianly are going to take on. So I put this thing, the woman empire, and then I put the wise. And she was pausing. What are you trying to say? I said, the wise and fall. And she went, And I put the wise and fall of the woman empire. So it was, as I say, humor often plays on the way that we mishear things and the way that we mishear and distort things. And I like that one, the wise and fall of the woman empire, which is like something out of Monty Python. I mean, me and that friend grew up listening to Monty Python humor, which a lot of it plays on perceptions, a lot of it, and assumptions, and also rigid, prejudices. And some of those guys in there, they're the least prejudiced people on the earth. And they're very, very flexible and very, very creative. So are there any topics or issues where you find it challenging to consider alternative viewpoints? You get caught in black and white thinking. Recently, someone lectured me. There was a layperson, and I've been a monk now for 13 years, a Samanera 13 years, and then like 3 years before that. So altogether, about 16 years of training. And they came up lecturing me that you must never, ever, ever, ever prepare a Dharma talk. It's the only one way that things should be done in the Theravada. Is because like a famous, several famous monks do it that way, and they're very talented at doing it. For them, it's now dogma that you have to do it that way. That any monk who is reading from a suttas or is doing it with preparation is, an offense, a serious offense, and doing it completely wrong. So I was just like taken aback. I just thought it was amusing to see that they had come into this very rigid way, and that they were very ego-based, like we in the Theravada, like not you, like I'm Theravada. I was ordained in a Theravada temple 13 years ago, and I've been giving Dharma talks ever since. Some of them prepared and some of them not. So it was just an amusing example of the way that an imbalanced perspective can arise. So are there any topics or issues where you find it challenging to consider alternative viewpoints of some kind or other? Then how might you approach those topics with a more open and curious mindset? I want to know, not I know, like, I want to know, what's it like from your point of view? Is there something that I'm missing? Can you explain what's life like from there? Whatever it is, whether it's any form of sentient being, try to put yourself in their shoes or paws or claws or a worm? You know, what's it, or a plant? What is it like to be in, you know, in this acting thing that I was talking about, the dramatizing? That can be an example of trying to do that. And then C, the last one, share an experience where gaining a different perspective changed your understanding or brought about a shift in your beliefs. I experienced this. I won't go into it at length, but I experienced it when I was trying to learn how to do screenplay and drama writing, and I just couldn't figure out how you create characters. Nowadays, you can just do it with ChatGPT. But I went into various ways to try to look at, you know, the different personality types that we all, you know, seem to have. And then I got interested in astrology on the basis of that. And I found that very interesting, this type of person, whether it's true or not, there's a whole other issue. That's a whole perception thing and a belief system of its own. But I just liked the way it described the people, you know, this sort of dreamy, spiritual, confused, you know, person with boundary issues, and then another person who's a sort of industrial leader, and he's very, very, you know, dynamic and energetic and very clear and direct and logical, and, you know, sort of thing. And other ones that were very, you know, home-based, and other ones that were very good at drama, and other ones that were very, you know, like astrology types. So I just found that previously I had no time for it, and then I shifted a different perspective, and I changed my understanding, and I brought that in, and it helps me with, you know, but I'm also not dogmatic about it. I'm also like, sometimes it's got a bit of something, but I totally understand if someone has got no time for it. I understand that, you know, like, I think that's all right too. So what else? So I've got a bunch of funny things that happened, you know, all through the day, but some things to remind, you know, the attitude of humor. I know I've heard some monks come under a lot of criticism for using humor at all. I don't think we have to go too far. The Buddha would use humor. He was just doing it very wryly and dryly and very sort of subtly often as well. He's not a gag person, but he would often sort of embark on things that were very sort of educational, hilarious in the long run. A monk who was trying to get more, he was trying to say he needs to move because, you know, he had a reason why he needed to move his place of lodging. But what he was really doing was trying to get lots of materials from donors so that he could build his own place. That's what he really, really wanted. So in order to do that, he was grumbling about the amount of noise where he was staying. And he said that he was staying in a place, and it was, you know, sort of off in a lovely natural place, but, you know, it's next to a lake. And because of that, there were hundreds and hundreds of flamingos. And the flamingos were making a racket of noise all the time. So he just couldn't meditate. So he'd have to go somewhere else. So rather than getting ear defenders or whatever you got in those days, earplugs or some kind. So he went bothering the Buddha. For, you know, I really want to get some, you know, can I get some, you know, sort of roofing materials and a door and a window and some clay and some construction works and another site, because. So he said, well, there is something that you could do about that problem. And the monk went, oh, what's that? And he said, well, can you go to down in the when the flamingos are all there, when they're there, I would like to go down there peacefully, don't disturb them away, and just go up to the flamingos one by one and ask them to give a feather each. Fting, get one, and go to the fting, and get another one, and fting, and get another, and fting, and go around until you've got, you know, like, you know, a big amount of these, and then come back to me and show me tell me what happens. So 2 weeks later, the monk comes back, and he says, and the Buddha says, how things down there now? And he said, all the flamingos flew away. They were all gone. And the Buddha said, well, that's what's going to happen to all our supporters if we go around to every one of them and say, can we have a bit of wood? Can we have a little bit of windows? Can we have a little bit of shelving? Have you got some tiles? Have you got things? All of our supporters will all fly away. That's funny. That's dry wisdom from the Buddha. It's a perfect example of how someone can do that. But there was a time when monks who were modest, the monks who were not modest, caused a monk, they were tickling him and tickling him and tickling him and tickling him. Quite a lot of them all the time. So I was laughing. No, laughing until he can't. And he actually died because he couldn't breathe because they were tickling him so much. Monks, like, you know what they're supposed to be like? Well, they weren't like that. They were misbehaving. So this monk fainted and, unable to get his breath, died. It's a tragedy. It's not a comedy. I don't know why you're laughing. So those that were modest monks spread it about, saying, you know, how can the group of 6 monks, these naughty monks, make a monk laugh by tickling him, make him die with the fingers? And how could they just be tickling him in the first place? So the Buddha laid down a rule, which is one of the rules in the Vinaya. You've heard of the 227. Well, this is one of them. That tickling with the fingers is an offense of expiation. So the Buddha had a sense of humor, but he wasn't reckless and ridiculous like these guys. So there is a medium in there. So takeaway message. So cultivate awareness. So on the theme of perception, mindfulness, and not taking things too seriously. Basically, we just wrap those last ones all into one. So those basic things: perception, learn about it, get aware of it, become mindful of it. Mindfulness, cultivate mindfulness, which is what you need to be able to do that with perception. And thirdly, just not taking things too seriously. It's a big one. It's got me this far. I never have survived to this day without having a sense of humor, I'll tell you that much. So cultivate awareness. I want to encourage you to develop an awareness of your own perceptions, biases, and assumptions. Always look if you've got an assumption in there. And it's very important to question and challenge those perspectives. Secondly, embrace mindfulness. All right. So I think, long-time practitioners understand this, and there are so many benefits in reducing stress and enhancing focus and fostering a deeper appreciation of life's experiences. You get much more out of it. If you're right there, you'll see things that other people just don't notice. Thirdly, joy in the present. So I want to encourage you to adopt a light-hearted and flexible attitude towards life's challenges. That's very important. And then I want to share the message of not getting overly attached to outcomes, and find joy in what actually happened in the present moment, even amidst difficulties. So it's, like learning to dance in the rain, not just saying, when the rain finishes, then we'll be happy. No, all of it, warts and all, as we say in English. Fourthly, foster resilience, build a resilience, be capable of bouncing back, be capable of coping with the unknown and the unexpected. And then, within reason, highlight the importance of resilience in your life. Yeah, really focus on that. The more that you can be bouncing back, the better. And I'd like to encourage you to approach setbacks with grace, maintain a sense of humor, and cultivate that adaptability, even in adversity. Right? Fifthly, seek a balanced perspective. And I'd like to encourage you to explore different perspectives and challenge your own beliefs. And I'd like to highlight the power of embracing a curiosity mindset. And that will help you get a broader understanding of yourself and the world. So those are the overall messages I'd like you to take away. Cultivate awareness, embrace mindfulness, find joy in the present, foster resilience, and seek a balanced perspective. And this is aimed to inspire personal growth, well-being, and a deeper connection with yourself and the world. All right. So thank you very much for listening through this. And I apologize if I've offended anyone. And when I was chatting originally on this topic with a group in Sydney, typically and classically, there were internet power outages right the way through. And I had all my notes and everything sort of prepared, and I was ready to go. And then, connecting, and then coming up, and then the little line along the top on the tab was going backwards and forwards. I was like, no. So it literally crashed about 20 times. And I'd re-arrive and go, hey, I'm back. And then, and it would sort of go off. But I did manage to get a few humorous memories in that I thought I might share, that were shared at the group time. So there are a few of those that I was delighted to line up. I delight in humor. It's my downfall, especially laughing at my own jokes. But one of them was about when I was in Manila, about to end a 5-year stay in the Philippines, and I was going to go to Singapore and then Australia. So I had a big box of printed material that I wanted to forward and to Australia. So that's not a Manila to Australia. So I knew I had to use an international shipping agency or flying agency of some kind. So the only one I could think of, I looked on the maps, was FedEx. What's the other one? I can't remember. There are a few, but that was the only one I could remember. And then I had to try to find where is FedEx in Manila, So there was a mega mall that it said it was. And this mega mall is like 3/4 of a mile long, So I turned up and the taxi that I got wouldn't go all the way there either. It dropped me off like 1,000 meters away. And it said, okay, it's not allowed, permitted. And I was like, okay. So I had to cross over all these roads, all these boxes. So it was all going pretty complicated. And then there's this mega mall, and it had car parks around it, and there were some guards. So I was like, how am I going to find, FedEx in amongst all of this? So with these boxes, I came up to the guards, and I speak a little bit of Filipino, but not that much. So I just tried going in English, and I just said, excuse me, where can I find FedEx? And the guard looked at me, nodding, and he said, yes, sir. Just wait right there, please. And he went over to the other guard, and he looked puzzled at me, and the other one looked puzzled at me, and they chatted to each other in Filipino. And then he came back to me and he said, what kind of fried eggs do you want exactly? So it was kind of brilliant. I said, no, it's okay. I'll find it. Don't worry. So I wandered off, and several hours later on, I managed to find FedEx and send it off. These kind of cute things are always happening across language and cultural barriers, and even age barriers and so on. And having taught 5 years in a junior high school in the Philippines, teaching Dharma and Buddhism, plenty of times this happened, But a cute one that I do recall. This was during my values and Buddha Dharma class. I would always make sure that they had 8 or 9 reflective questions. And these reflective questions were actually written by the students, and they would submit all of them per class. So I had an enormous, great big supply of reflective questions, which the next chunk of 8 would be given to them all at the next class, and they would all give me one back, and I'll give them 8, and they'll give me one back. So it was an accumulation of these reflective questions. Anyway, one of them I thought was answered very quaintly by one of the students. They were sort of 12 to 17 years old, the student. So the question that I put in was, if you could be anyone from history, alive or dead, who would it be and why? So the answer to one that came back was alive. And why? Because it's better to be alive than dead. It cracked me up. Another one did a nice answer that it was like, what do you do, on a rainy day if you can't go out? And they said, I play board games, BORED. Okay. I wrote to them, I said, that's very funny, but it's actually BOARD, like a board. And they went, oh, I never knew that. I should only heard the word board games, like, games you play when you're bored. So anyway, I don't want to start getting into the realm of, dad jokes, but the main thing is to learn that perception is one of the things in life that if you understand it, and it can easily turn toxic, and it can easily cause all kinds of problems for people, but it can also be a key to delight as well and enjoyment. So once it's your mind and your system is not running on autopilot and automatically churning out in sort of egos and insults and reasons to be inflamed and angry, that you can rise above the situations, and then perception can become something you play with, you can have quite good fun with, you can be responsible with, and you can look at your biases and other people's biases, and through that you can learn to use perception wisely. So that's a topic for another day. That was also raised in the Q&A during this, was how do you actually do that? How do you know if you're being wise or stupid? So that's also a good one. And then feedback is vitally important, and not having too much faith in your own abilities, but checking in with people and acknowledge there are many people who have more wisdom than you and me. I do it all the time. The main thing you have to do is to acknowledge your limitations, shrink your ego, and ask for advice from the right place, and not be afraid of authority. And I think this is one of the things we're seeing with artificial intelligence, which clearly half the time, most of the time, knows way more than we do. It's got much more access and speed. But how many people are terrified? And it's the same with teachers and schooling. Many people are like, I don't want to, they don't want to learn. They don't want to acknowledge that someone knows more than them. And so therefore they get very limited as well. Whether you're, in any art and craft, I've seen that a million times, where people don't want to learn more, or acknowledge that someone is more talented. So out of jealousy and ego, they aren't able to learn anymore. These are some things. So you've got your takeaways. And I've enjoyed very much doing this. And there are many other things that I would like to enjoy. I've had a lifetime of delight, and partly of this has been learned to recognize, hey, wait a minute, there is this thing called perception. There is this thing called misperception. And there is mindfulness that can help you to remain cool, calm, and collected, and enjoy life, enjoy the passage of time. And also you learn how to cultivate compassion along with that, and use it wisely, and use it fairly, and use it to benefit many other people. So in that, I wish you all to be benefited, and to be able to avoid avoidable suffering. Bhavatu sapa mangalang rakantu sapa devata, sapa buddha anupavena sada soti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sapa mangalang rakantu sapa devata, sapa dhamma anupavena sada soti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sapa mangalang rakantu sapa devata, sapa sangha anupavena sada soti bhavantu te. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering.